Look, at least promise me you won't drink. Alcohol always leads to trouble.
So now, barrel aging. When did this become part of the brewery, starting to do barrel aging beers and stuff like that? How did you guys
Shortly
jump into
after,
that?
shortly after I took over the brewery.
Right.
So, yep. And
Did
Anello was
Did you
working.
see this as a something of a trend early on?
No.
No?
No.
Okay.
No.
This was 2001.
Yeah, 2001. And remember pre-internet? So, it's not like we could look at, how to barrel age a beer or,
Mm-hmm.
AOL,
You didn't even-
getting like a picture
yeah.
coming down.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, we know now, like,
Check it in 20 minutes.
we know now, like, Goose Island was barrel aging already.
Yeah. Sure.
But at that time, we'd never heard of Goose Island or knew that they were barrel aging, so.
And Founders was too, but again, we didn't know of them.
Yeah.
Well, what was the muse then for you? Why did you feel the desire to get into it?
Do you remember? I remember.
Oh, yeah. We went.
You can't say the name of the brewery because
No.
that shit was illegal.
Yeah.
Hold on now. You can always edit this.
So we used to get yeast from a brewery down south of here, we'll say, and great pub, but they were cranking through beers, so they always had a lot of excess yeast, and we couldn't afford to order yeast from a laboratory and do it like we should have, but. So we'd go down to their place, 1 or 2 times a month and get a yeast harvest and bring it up and pitch it into our beers. And
I'll take the tangerine.
we got down there the one time, and Nello had actually gone with me that time to get the yeast harvest. And we're sitting there, and they're like, "Oh, you got to try this beer."
Refills.
Yeah, beer run.
No problem.
I love that tangerine.
I'll have a Coke.
Thank you.
So we get down, we get the yeast pitch, and we're sitting there talking. And he goes, "You got to." Their head brewer is like, "You got to try this beer." So he pours us a sample out of the tank, and big stout. We're trying it. We're like, "Well, what is it?" And he goes, "I got a hold of a Jim Beam barrel," and so I chopped it up and I threw it into the fermenter.
Really?
It was like,
Just
Almost
as
like doing the wood chip.
yeah,
idea.
just a wood
Yeah,
chip.
yeah, exactly.
For a
Same
small
idea.
batch.
Yep.
That's what we were talking
Yep.
about doing, yeah.
This is back before you could buy barrel-aged wood chips,
Sure. Right.
So we're trying it, and it's like, wow, that's not bad. He goes, yeah, we didn't really get any flavor off of it, so we just dumped a bunch of Jim Beam into it. But it had picked up enough of that the bourbon flavor that it was just, Anello and I are looking at each other like, again, we can do better than this,
Take this idea and do better.
we can. What if we reverse that idea of instead of, and literally we had never heard of somebody doing this with beer. We didn't know if it would work, but rather than throwing the barrel into the beer, throw the beer into the barrel.
Sure.
And so we hooked up with our old supplier who isn't in the business anymore. Crazy guy, awesome guy.
Is he in prison or?
No, he's kind of finally.
100% sure about that.
Possibly.
Yeah, no. Our old supplier was great. He was able to hook us up originally with 3 oak barrels, and it was just like, all right, let's do this. Drove down to Madison. We had an intern at that time, Billy, who went down there with me with his truck, and we drove him back. And 6 months later, we tried this stout that we had done, and it was amazing. Chips in your mouth, just because there's so much charcoal in a barrel, and, and we're even sampling, like, people are stopping by the brewery, like, you gotta try this. Like, we were blowing our own socks off, like,
Yeah. Bourbon
and,
stout.
yeah, and from there it just took off, like, started with 3 barrels, went to probably 6 the next year. Now remember, no forklift, no loading dock,
No money.
no money,
Controlled temperature, aging.
Oh, dude, no. This was in like the front garage area that would get like super hot in the summer, and the barrels would freeze in the winter.
Oh yeah, it was. We had very little control over what we were doing, But the flavors coming out of this were like nothing else you've ever tried,
Right.
So I think by the time we moved out of Junction City in the winter of 2006 and 7, we had probably 18 or 20 barrels in the program.
Sounds about right. I remember when we moved the barrels to this building, they were frozen.
Yeah, they'd froze that year.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Wow.
And then even when we first did Bourbon Barrel Cherry Stout, I remember when we did that, we piloted out a few different ways and landed on the actual fruit measure of it. Do you remember that first year realizing that we shouldn't have put a hard bung in the barrel, and you could see them swelling? You could see the barrels swelling from like fermentation, and we would like draw on straws to see who had to go drill a hole in there to relieve the pressure because
This is Crew Drive.
it is okay. That one's me. You wanted a Kolsch and a Kolsch.
Yeah, so it just went, like I said, it started with 3 barrels. We built a lot of relationships with suppliers and distilleries, able to get top-notch barrels, some real kind of high-end barrels that really ran most of our program the whole time. But, like I said, 30-something when we left Junction City, but once we moved here, it was like, all right, here we go. We jumped up to 100.
Yeah.
I think 100 or 120 within the first year and a half, which was just big enough to lose a barrel here and there, where we brewed this much bourbon stout. Well, this year we're going to try bourbon barley wine. Mm-hmm. Okay, but we got a half rack, so we put one bourbon stout on it, and 6 months later you put a bourbon barley wine on it. And, software was QuickBooks back then, so there was no inventory, and
If the TTB is listening, we were keeping physical inventory.
yes, physical inventory all the time.
course.
Statute of limitations,
Statute
please.
limitations.
Right?
3 years ago.
Yeah. But yeah, we'd lost a barrel. So up until that point, we were doing all 6-month aging. So we were getting these great flavors off these barrels with 6 months of aging. And when we got big enough, we lost one of those barrels, and when we went to pull all the bourbon barley wine out to package it up, there was now a year-old bourbon barrel stout on that rack. And we tried it, and it was just like,
So much better.
Yeah.
this is a totally different product. Yeah, and so
So
immediately our entire program changed. We said everything goes to 1 year minimum.
okay.
Yep.
wow.
Yep. And that's
really
when
how it happened.
literally
One got left behind. And
One
tried it, you're
lost
like,
barrel.
Damn, this is better.
well, you got to remember back then though we were
boom.
so cash strapped and so poor
that you couldn't.
that
You needed to sell it all.
tying up that
Yeah.
cash for another
Yeah,
6
sure.
months is
Yeah.
like a financial struggle.
Absolutely.
Even now, like the years that we've added on to the barrel aging facility, trying to cash flow that is almost impossible.
Yeah.
I mean, because you got a lot of money, you got to pay for those barrels and all the ingredients and the racks and all that up front, and then some of those you don't see. Some of those aren't turning cash for you
Right.
for 3 years of aging.
Yeah.
Right.
So now you're taking all the money you have and tying it up in a program that you won't see money back out of. Compared to a stainless steel fermenter where, okay, we buy this $40,000 fermenter. Well, you're turning beer out of it every 2 weeks.
Right.
So now you're making money a lot faster. So it was really kind of redesigning or cash flowing a different style of business. More like a winemaker than a brewery.
Right. And the scariest part about it, though, is think, if we're talking, okay, I'm going to age something for 3 years. Think about the trends in beer were 3 years ago.
Oh yeah.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly.
And so you're tying your cash and your efforts up into a product that
May not be popular when
may
you
not be
about it.
popular when it
Yeah.
comes out. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so, that's a hard part.